We will be doing meta coaching next year here in the United States, next June, so it's still a year and 15, 16 months away. And these are some of the brochures from last year. And so if you want to see anything about meta coaching, we've got the full meta coaching brochure on meta-coaching.org. And
you have a location on that already?
it'll be in Colorado. It'll be back in Grand Junction, Colorado next year.
It is an amazing place.
It'll be, it's amazing, it's amazing. And I didn't even pay for it.
Do you want any of us to give a testimony of what it was like?
Will you be nice? Okay.
All right. If anybody ever thought of coaching at any point in their life, that is the best training I've ever done, and I've done quite a bit. So it just took everything and took it, just shot it through the roof. So it was very intense, but very, very powerful and very accurate. And I learned how to receive and give feedback and not think of it as criticism. And welcome feedback.
Wow.
So because I could put in the correction immediately rather than keep making the same mistake. So it's very powerful.
You said that your career really shot
My
up.
career shot off.
What's it called? What's it called?
So,
What is the which training?
Yeah.
meta coaching.
Yeah, I did hear the first part.
There, I'm yourself.
Our meta coaching system involves NOP as the first model, the communication model, metastates as the second model, so APG is module 2. Then when we get to the 8 days of ACMC, or Coaching Mastery, you'll be introduced to 5 more models: the Matrix, Axis of Change, Benchmarking Model, Self-Actualization Model, and the Matrix Business Plan. So we have 7 models so that you can answer the question, how do you know what to do, when, with whom, and why? And it's 8 days of coaching boot camp from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. It's 3 days minimum for NOP, 3 days for Metastates, 8 days for that. And so the certificate means that you'll have 180 hands-on classroom hours of coach-specific training at least. We call it ACMC, a Associate Certified Meta Coach. And so the MCF, the Meta Coach Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization in Australia, is the governing board of meta coaching. And it's like the ICF, the International Coach Federation, except our standards are higher, and we have a board of examiners, and we have a way of holding coaches accountable and having conflict resolution through the process if a client ever has a complaint against a coach. So we have that self-governing process because we want to move the field of coaching to a profession, and so that there's walls to entrance to it, and standards that are measured in terms of competency. Barriers to entry.
So if we're not, I'm sorry to take a long time here, but if we're not looking to get a job as a coach,
Right.
If we're looking for a different form of our own business, that's not really necessary, or is that the requirements on that?
No. About half the people who come through are business owners or executives. They're looking at coaching as a methodology of communication. And so about half the people come through are not planning to be a coach as a profession. Today, we've been thinking about if this is what's meaningful to me and I want to perform it and I want to synthesize that, as I hold that space to integrate that, to get in the zone so that the first pattern is, what am I going to actualize? The meaning and performance axes so that I can synthesize and begin to make it real and create an action plan. And then the state. And that's what we just finished, the state that will support all of that. So there was that process of unleashing possibilities and then coming back to the state that will support that, and that will ground whatever that response of unleashing some potential, the state that will support that. And so what you went through is what we call the genius state, it's the flow state, it's how to organize that so you can just turn it on, turn it off, and have it at your access. And It's not a pattern that if that's new to you to do just once and assume you have it, just keep repeating it and repeating it. Get someone to play with you. Invite someone. Would you like to step into where you can just be in the zone and facilitate that? Because as you facilitate it, it'll be great learnings for you. And after a while, when you find a new state that you want to really make a focused state, you'll have the structure about how to do that. So you can do that with learning, you can do that with communication, you can do that with your business, with anything of significance, importance, that it's a unique and discrete state that will really support that unleashing. So comments, questions as we wrap this part of it up?
My question is when you is creating, like for me, preferring a global thing, is creating a performance state too broad?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Who's performing what?
right. But I mean, it's you see what I'm saying? It's sense. So you're thinking it's got to be really like in your case specific to writing or something real.
Because each performance state will be different.
Right.
But to start with, though, I could see you creating a state that you identified for a particular performance.
Right.
And then possibly trying to use that or some elements of that for different types of performances. You know, rather than saying, I got to come up with one for that, and one for that, one for that.
Yeah.
Get a good one and just start off that way. And then as you roll along, you'll start to tweak it and say, well, that's going to be a little different for this type of performance. Like, you know.
Oh, thanks. So.
What other resources do you need to make it better for what you need?
Okay.
Are you going to talk about some of these other techniques in here that we haven't covered? How to
I'm
use
going
them?
to try to. like which one?
Oh, I'm just thinking of receiving feedback and continuous development.
Okay, so there is a page in your manual on staying in the zone. And I'm not going to dare tell you what page. But I'm sure that you can find it now. So staying in the zone. If you can get in the zone, then one of the questions will be, how can you stay in the zone and keep stepping in and out so that as you do, it gets refined, it gets richer, it gets fuller, and you have more discriminations, more distinctions as the years go by. So when you step into a state that's going to be interpersonal, with client, with colleague, with friendship, with whatever, and that's the kind of state, you'll make those refinements. So staying in the zone. If you watch small children at play, you can see the ease and naturalness of this genius state, and that's why I believe it's a natural place to be. But as adults, we have to make some adjustments so that we can recover that. It's easy to pop out of these, and things can interrupt us. Have you ever been interrupted from really a good optimal state, and maybe it took you weeks to get back, or months to get back? So as we shorten that time so that I can get back and not get interrupted. So to deal with these, we'll set the frames for controlling and managing the experience. What can keep us in the state? What can solidify and integrate the experience so we can step in and out with ease? And set up an attractor frame so we can optimally operate from that. Well, there's two things here, two things that really will help us to keep on synthesizing meaning and performance. And one is immediate sensory feedback, and the other is a great attitude toward challenges and problems. So the next few pages in your manual after this has a pattern that we've pulled out from meta coaching on feedback, and then from Living Genius on problems. But to describe this right here, the very first thing is I need to know how I'm doing. Because if I don't know how I'm doing and not getting that feedback, it's going to be hard to know if I'm staying in that zone. So that sensory feedback and looking for that. So this answers the question, how do you know that you're still there? How do you know it's improving, moving in the direction you want it to, and having the kind of refinements? And this is where we get that feedback and look for that feedback. And so the next pattern is going to be the frames and creating a matrix of frames so that I'm okay with feedback. In fact, I become a feedback junkie. I really want feedback because this is the mirror so that I can do refinement. So for the most part, the skill of receiving feedback, we're always getting feedback, but whether we're noticing it, whether we're responsive to it, whether we take hurt and offense through it, or whether it's just feedback. So some of the things we've already done, separation of person and behavior, and then that adjustment of our attitude, of our frames, if we know how to value it. So this is where that appreciation, what can I value about the responses I get? Most responses you get will not be feedback. It'll be judgment. It'll be opinion. It'll be evaluation. It'll be their state. It'll be projection. So part of receiving feedback is knowing how to mine, how to squeeze the value out of the judgment. And so if we start with a frame that it means something to them, if we start with an NLP presupposition, the meaning of my communication to you is the response I get, in spite of what I was attempting to communicate. So that somehow it got filtered, and it'll be interesting to me to see how it got filtered. So I never know what I've communicated until I see a response, and the response tells me what it must have meant to you. So this no blame and curiosity frame allows me to really be open to feedback and to be able to mine the feedback. So even if I get judgment, we could say, oh, it's judgment. I'm not going to take that. That's their problem. Or we could, what is a grain of truth that I can get from that? In what way? What enables you to say that? How is that true for you? Help me to understand. And then we can really go hunting for that feedback and mining it, even if it wasn't delivered with any elegance or skill. Because most of what we receive isn't feedback. It isn't sensory-based, it isn't timely, it isn't clean, it's imposition, it's judgment, so it violates everything about feedback. The second one, so we'll talk about feedback in just a moment as we talk a little bit more about that, but a great attitude toward challenges and problems. How we semantically load up our understanding of this concept that we call problems. Because once again, as a normalization, it doesn't exist. So we just solved all your problems. There is no such. Take a problem and put it on the chair. What does it sound like or look like or feel like? No, not her. Not him. A problem is a problem because of the way we framed it. And I want to spend a little time talking about that in just a minute, but it's the way we semantically load it up so that what state do you go into when you think about a problem? And here's another question, an NLP question. How big are you when you see a problem? Or how small are you? How big is the problem? How small is it? If you think about a small problem and think about how do I represent a small problem? Probably, even at the representational level of the movie in your mind, you're bigger than the problem. But when you think about a big problem, probably, if I could peek into the theater of your mind, somehow you've represented that problem and you're much smaller than the problem. So even at the I have asked this question so many times that it's almost I can almost say it's a pattern. So one solution is, what if you became bigger? Just swell yourself up and look at the problem. So even at the representational level of how we encode it, and so our response to a problem and so forth. So let me go a couple pages over and talk about problem first, and we'll come back to feedback. Because if you can reframe your response and have and actualize your problem-solving skills, then talk about actualizing things. Because for the most part, we're going to be actualizing things through solutions, through problem solving. And this comes out of some of the stuff we do as games business experts play, and some questions about embracing problems and difficulties and discipline as just things thrown in a path that we'll need to deal with. Let me give you the NOP definition of a problem. And this comes from John Grinder and Michael McMaster in their book on business. The word problem always identifies a present desired state difference. A problem is defined as the difference between present state and desired state. It's the gap between where I am now and where I want to be. Problem is that difference. And so the page before that, you'll see the little score model from Robert Dilts. Robert Dilts describes a problem as the gap between present state and desired state. And so it is the difference between where you are, where you want to be. And so the score model gives us kind of an algebraic way of thinking. Where am I? What's the symptoms? What's causing this? Where do I want to get? What will be the effects of that? And what will be the resources that will bridge it? So if a problem is just the difference between where I am and where I want to be, and you're a problem solver, if that's part of who you are and what you're about and the resources to solve problems, to find solutions, to close that gap between where I want to be and where I am, and to apply resources. This is all that's about problem solving. So if that's the definition of a problem, then this should enable us to have a better attitude about problems, that this is what allows us to actualize, to stretch, to become more. Every problem is therefore an opportunity for us to become more and to actualize our mental, emotional, verbal, behavioral skills. So if we can have an oh boy response to how can I deal with whatever the problem is in the way. So if we're going to be a good problem solver, then there's some questions there about how do we think about that and a passion for problem solving. Then a couple pages over, there is a well-formed problem pattern. I wish I had come up with that, but I didn't. Martin Roberts, in his book, Change Management for the 21st Century, Change Management Excellence, an NLP book, has this. I just organized it in this way. What's a well-formed problem? Most of us know that a problem well-formed, well-stated, well-defined is half solved. I think it's 90% solved if you can well define the problem. Well, in NLP, we got a well-formed solution, a well-formed outcome. Here's a well-formed problem and a badly formed problem, a problem that is formed so poorly that you can't solve it. And so you can see we've got, it's just a tool. You could go down with these distinctions. Is there specificity? Is there precision in description? Distinct boundaries? Time element? Causes and contributing factors? Consequences? Attempted solutions? Oftentimes we try to solve problems or work with somebody and we haven't even asked them, what have you tried? Because we jump in and they've already tried that and they've already tried that. And so our words don't seem to be very effective because they know that won't work. Because we didn't even ask, what have you tried so far? Attempted solutions. Political frames and dimensions, symptoms specified, ownership of problems. So just going through and asking and exploring what is the problem and getting it well defined, you can see how that if it's ill-defined, if it's badly formed, you can't solve it because you're trying to solve something that's vague, that's fuzzy, that's unclear. You don't know if it's even a problem or their problem. And so just as a tool, so a well-formed problem and having a tool to going at that, this is just a question tool set that enables us to do that. A couple pages earlier of that, sort out what's not the problem. And you'll see 4 things there. I always check these before I start solving a problem. Because if you're trying to deal with a symptom, you're not dealing with a problem. And if symptoms, if signs, if expressions of a problem are intense and in your face and big and someone putting there and you solve that symptom, problem's still there. That was just a Band-Aid. Have you ever done Band-Aid therapy? Band-Aid coaching? But we're recruited to that. We're recruited and seduced to it because it's loud, it's big, it's in your face, it's a symptom. But it's just a symptom. And so this is where part of our entering into a problem is embracing it to really see what it is. Several of you have said what was offered to you first when you explored it, that wasn't really the problem. It was just a symptom and expression. So if you can embrace that to find the real problem. A paradox is not a true problem. It's a confusion of logical levels. That's why it cannot be solved so that it goes away. It can only be resolved in a way so that you can understand the category error. So a paradox, and I've been speaking about that as counterintuitive things. So a paradox. So a paradox would be, is not a problem. The paradox of embracing our fallibility. Our fallibility is not a problem. Unless at a higher logical level, you don't allow yourself to be what you are. If you hate your fallibility, it creates symptoms, but you can't solve it except the very thing that is so paradoxical, so counterintuitive, is to embrace the very thing that you want to solve. But the interesting thing is when you embrace it, when you embrace your anger, embrace your fear, the fear and anger doesn't go away, but it becomes managed. So it's a paradox rather than a problem. So is it a real problem or is it a paradox of logical levels? A lot of the meta programs ends up being paradoxes rather than. So the person who has procedures options as, in a polarity way, and I can't stand to do procedures. So we can really play with that. So the options person, paradoxically, may have one option is to do procedure. So is one of your options to do procedure? Or you don't have that option? How limiting. And it's paradoxical at different logical levels. I have to do a procedure. So that's one of your options. You have to do a procedure. And so we can bring options to that. Do you have another procedure that you could do in another context? No, I have just one procedure. Oh, you got two. So now you got options. In this context, and so it's paradox. And so many of meta programs and logical levels, it's a category error. It's we're not dealing on the same level. It's at different logical levels. Sometimes there's linguistic riddles. These can come up, and we confuse them with a problem. It's just about words. It's about how you define it. And this is where the meta model becomes very useful. William James asked, if a rabbit is on a tree and you see the rabbit and you go around the tree and the rabbit keeps looking at you, have you gone around the rabbit? Ah! Well, a squirrel. A squirrel. A squirrely rabbit. So have you gone around the squirrel? He used rabbit, that's what I'm quoting. Not my mistake. Have you gone around it? Well, it all depends upon what you mean by around. as the squirrel faced me and I walked that way, in one way I went around, but then I never got to the backside of the squirrel. But as a linguistic, we haven't clarified our terms. What do you mean by going around? And there's a lot of problems that people present to us that is the way and we just run with their words and don't ever ask them precisely, specifically, what do you mean by that? And so sometimes we're too reactive. We hear criticism or low self-esteem, and we start just running with that word and don't clarify it because it's, for the most part, just some linguistic riddle or linguistic confusion. And then some problems are actually just unrealistic expectations. Rather than being a true problem, we have set ourselves up with some misunderstandings, some false mappings about the world, so that we're trying to obtain something that's not even possible, so there's no real problem but a disorientation to reality. Perfection is a good example of that. When we expect that anything we start, we do it right and correct the first time. I mean, there's no problem. When someone tells me, don't do that, well, what's the problem? Don't you grow by steps and get better? Because if you have to do it right the first time, then... So it's the expectation and the distortion there. So unrealistic expectations can pose as problems. So we've got some tools here for problem solving, and if we orient ourselves with a really supercharged attitude that this is the way I can grow and develop and extend and actualize myself, then we can enter into it just looking to use our well-formed problem and then our well-formed outcome and just as tools to explore what we're talking about. So having a great attitude for problems will keep us in the zone. So the problem doesn't become a stumbling block, something to throw us out, something that interfere with us, but we just take it in stride. It's something to build upon, something to develop. And the great self-actualizers tend to have that kind of attitude so that when they have a problem, they just go into the mode of how can I bring resources to this, how can I explore it, how can I embrace it, and as they go into it, a lot of times that's where new creativity just emerges in a tremendous way. I was reading Rudy Giuliani's book on leadership, and when he was elected mayor of New York, and he had about 4 months before he was going to be inaugurated, he thought, I've never been to mayor school. I've never been to University of Mayors. I don't have a certificate of mayorship. So he said, I suddenly realized I've got a problem. And then he said, what would a person need to know to run a major city of 12 million people? What would a person need to know and to have intelligent information about? So
You've just been thinking about that.
So he said, who are the most intelligent people about economics, crime, and just he went housing and taxes, and he just went down the line, and he started creating just day by day. He hired them to come in and do a one-man seminar. Well, actually, he brought a staff in. He brought them in and did seminars so that he would get a degree in mayorship. It was when he brought in the two sociologists who had written the book Broken Records about how you stop crime, how you do a social change process, that he got some ideas about how to do that, and he started integrating that. But I thought, what a self-actualizing type of orientation, that if I don't know something, I'll just create my own school for my own education. It's not going to stop me because I don't know it yet. And I don't need to study at all. I'll get the most intelligent minds I can. I mean, what an attitude to making something happen. And so what problem would put you off? What problem would put you out of state? Would knock you off your your optimum self-actualizing state, would interfere with your vision, and if that problem, if you took some of these attitudes about that to go in there, it's just something in the way. And how to respond to that. So that no matter how big your vision becomes, the bigger the vision, the bigger the problem. In fact, the size of a leader is the size of the problems that the leader will address and take on. So if we were going to measure you by the size of your problems, how big are you? And how big do you want to become? This is the occupational hazard of wanting to make a difference in the world. The more you want that, there's going to be more people who dislike what you're doing and will try to stop what you're doing and will criticize what you're doing. And so the size of your self-actualization will be the size of the problems you're handling. Ooh. Well, the size of your growth, the size of your development, the size of your self-actualization will be the size of the problems you're handling.
So I need to de-actualize if I want small problems.
I'm going to de-actualize. I started realizing this. It was a shock. I didn't know that at first, that when I started doing metastates, and there would be this article that would be critical of what I've done, and this article would be critical, and I had to kind of get used to it. There's going to be this criticism. Then after a while, I felt like if I went a week and someone wasn't criticizing it or writing some article about it, that I felt, oh, shoot, I need to be doing more. So every critical article was free advertisement. New frame.
It's called reframing that criticism, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Can you reframe problem by changing it to a different thing? A different, like, just challenge? Is it, I know you like using the word problem, but I mean, does it hurt to say
Well, a
challenge?
lot of people do that. A lot of people won't call it a problem and will call it something else. But a problem is something in your way. It's a constraint. It's something that is interfering. And if you embrace the fact that things can get in the way, people can get in the way, goals can get in the way, you can get sick, and that becomes a problem. There's things that get in the way, and if you're going to be stopped by something that gets in the way, how big of a thing has to get in your way before you're stopped? So the bigger the thing that gets in the way, the more you start thinking in terms of, can I go through it? Can I go around it? Can I go under it? Who can help me to deal with whatever it is that's in the way? And if it's I would put one of those it's just a problem. It's just something to deal with. It's not going to stop me. That's why I asked the question of Olaf earlier. Now you're sitting there. This was planned. I asked earlier, are you unstoppable? Can anything stop you? Because I think that's a real important question. Can anything stop you from self-actualizing, from living your passion, from finding your visions and making your dreams come? Are you unstoppable? What resources, what things do you need to become so that it will happen. That you're going to make it happen. And that's that supercharged attitude about problems. It's something to deal with. So.
I just want to add something. I just read a study that the biggest difference between technologies that had a lot of patents and technologies that had a lot of patents and a lot of money was their ability to bounce back from disappointment and to handle, it's called the resilience.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Huge difference.
So part of being unstoppable is that if I do stumble and fall, how long does it take me to bounce back? Which is resilience. How resilient are you to bounce back? Viktor Frankl had just graduated from medical school. He had just gotten his degree as a psychoanalyst. He had just written his first article in a psychoanalytic magazine in Germany, and then he was taken to the camp. Talk about, is that a problem? If you read his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he didn't treat it like a major problem. It was just something in the way. And he apparently didn't get traumatized by it. He apparently kept his mind, his heart alive and vigorous, so he didn't get bitter, and he lived till 84, 85, and just a couple years ago died. And during all those years, he contributed and gave, and just untraumatizable, unstoppable.
He never lost hope.
So never lost hope.
Never lost hope.
Do you think that was more of his character, or was that brought with his training?
Well, he developed in there, and he was in the process of developing logotherapy when he was in there, and so he started So what did he do in the camp? He started studying people, and he was in a witnessing state, observing, well, that person seems really strong and robust, but then they go and die, and here's this little scrawny person who just is struggling, and they just keep, and they just never die. And as a medical doctor, what's the difference? How can I explain this? What's going on? And so his conclusion was, this person has meaning. This person has no reason to live. He applied it to himself, his reasons for living and what he was going to do when he was out. So he didn't make it personal. He didn't make it permanent. He didn't make it pervasive. And so he was able to keep it out. So the ability to be resilient and to be unstoppable and to bounce back and to take that learning, that feedback learning, and just bounce back is going to be at the key. Here's another answer to that question. How do we self-actualize? We have a great attitude about the things set before us so that we rise up and really respond to it with all of our resources. And what resources we don't have, we go find. We're a resource hunter, externally, internally, so that we can figure out how to do that. And if that's the attitude, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'll invent it as I go. I mean, that's the attitude we need if we're going to really actualize our highest potential and not just sell ourselves short. So,
Just one last thing on Viktor Frankl. That inventive piece, what was he also doing? He wrote his next paper in his mind, and on every scrap of paper he could write on. He kept the dream alive.
So he kept the dream alive. Paul?
Yeah, talking about concentration camps, there's a book out on Broken Will by a 101-year-old survivor of the concentration camps right now. Unbelievable.
What's the name of it?
Unbroken Will.
Unbroken Will.
Yeah.
Okay. Current biography of survivor. Okay. David?
Can you talk more about the forces of a problem? Where have you seen that?
This is from Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was a psychologist, sociologist, and he came up with another way of looking at problems, and this is under Analyze the Forces of a Problem. Whenever there's a problem, there are restraining forces preventing me from moving forward, and there's constraining ones, the driving forces that move me forward. So you can just ask the question, what drives you forward, and what's holding you back? What's holding you back? What constraints are you up against? It might be some personal constraints, it may be some interpersonal, it may be some social, maybe some financial, maybe some political constraints that we have to deal with. And so force field of forces, force field analysis is what this model comes from Kurt Lewin, and asking these questions, once again, to explore a problem. What holds it in place? Any problem is held in place by different forces. So it's just, once again, just another tool for exploring what's going on. So a lot of times when I'm working with someone, I'll say, what's holding you back? The NLP question, what stops you? And what stops you externally from doing this? What has to be addressed? What are those constraints out there that somehow we need to develop intelligence about or skills about? So what skills do you need to handle that? So the force field analysis. So that comes from the Kurt Lewin model. Some of you are familiar with that. So it's that equilibrium of forces and the oscillation between the push and the pull of anything. So while I can't spend a lot of time about problems, just the sense that the realization that self-actualization occurs through problems. Self-actualization is a function of problems. And so not fighting problems, but one of the chapters I have in the book Unleash is capitalizing on problems. And here's some quotations just about that. You gain strength, courage, confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You're able to say to yourself, I lived through that horror, and I can take the next thing that comes along. Who said that? Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a contemporary of Maslow, and Maslow interviewed her as a self-actualizing person. He was really impressed with her as a woman who did a lot in her time for women's rights and for many other things. Here's a couple quotations from Maslow that is in his book, Toward a Psychology of Being. We know that the complete absence of frustration, of pain, of danger is dangerous. To be strong, a person must acquire frustration tolerance, the ability to perceive physical reality as essentially indifferent to human wishes, so just witnessing it, the ability to love others and enjoy the their need gratifications as well as one's own. So if we were going to do a skill and do a benchmark on frustration tolerance, how much tolerance of frustration, where's your frustration tolerance level? The lower it is, the less you can take. The quicker you can be thrown off. The higher your frustration tolerance. So the ability to inure ourselves against little irritations and to frame it so that we're not reactive to everything and to have some frustration tolerance. And to keep at it with that strength of character is what this is describing. So frustration tolerance. That's the best, we inure ourselves to frustration. And the meanings we give to it. Most of us know this with our children. Children are born with no frustration tolerance. and we know that it does good to develop that tolerance to that frustration, especially, I want it now. I want what I want now. And as we learn, these things of patience and the ability to stay with something. Here's another quotation. To the extent that these experiences, and he's talking about discipline, deprivation, pain, tragedy, frustration, to the extent that these experiences reveal and foster and fulfill our inner nature, to that extent they're desirable experiences. It is increasingly clear that these experiences have something to do with a sense of achievement and the sense of ego strength, and therefore with a sense of healthy self-esteem and confidence. The person who has not conquered, withstood, overcome, continues to feel doubtful that he could. This is true not only of external dangers, it also holds true for the ability to control and to delay one's impulses, and therefore to be unafraid of those impulses. So this is where problems measure our size, and when a problem comes, if your attitude is, I'll figure it out, I'll find a way, I'll pull together internal, external resources, mobilize those so that I can not be stopped, but find a way through whatever the challenge is. so this is a picture of self-actualization, the tendency to want to extend, to want to expand, to want to be everything you can be, and probably why most people don't live a self-actualizing life. That most people want to live at the lower needs and just want equilibrium. Whereas once we move up and start getting resourceful, then we want to use our resources. We want to be stretched. How much do you want to be stretched? Not a lot. Or a lot. A lot. What stretch goals do you have for yourself this next week? What stretch goals? We do this in meta coaching. We ask everybody on a certain day, name your stretch goal. And then we have a little conversation. We have a stretch goal conversation, and the stretch goal conversation goes, how is that a stretch? How much could you pull that off right now anyway? How much of it is stretch? Is it 10% stretch or 1% stretch? You know, what would be a, come on, what would be a real stretch? Because if we grow, if we self-actualize by stretching, taking on something that is going to take a lot of me to make that happen, this is where, as we awaken ourselves to a bigger vision of self-actualization and to give ourselves a chance to believe in ourselves more than we've been believing. So who's going to be the next world-renowned coach in this room? If not you, who? Who's going to be the next world-renowned trainer? To be the best you can be and to make a difference and to believe that you can stand out head and shoulders. So raising it and stretching it. I believe I can put neurosemantics and NLP on the international map. And I'm going to make it happen. I don't know when or where or how. I don't know who I'm going to bring with me. But I'm going to make it. I'm going for it. It's one of my stretch goals. So how big is your stretch goal? As a coach, if you're not stretching, it'll be hard for you to really communicate that with your clients to really get them to stretch. And as parents, for us to facilitate in our children some visions of something bigger, and if we're not living it, so stretching and treating problems as just a problem. What's the problem? It's just something in the way. And it's really big. But I'm getting bigger than my problem to begin to address it. And so looking for those resources. And so the problem facet is going to be one of the ways to stay in the zone. Well, the other one is the feedback. So let me say a few words about that on the feedback. I pulled a couple pages out of our meta coaching on receiving feedback for continuous development. And the little box there on high quality feedback. 7 qualities of high quality feedback. If the feedback is sensory based and behavioral, so it's something you see, hear, feel, precise information in small steps, timely, given as immediate as possible, relevant to outcome, with rapport, given with rapport, with care, with compassion, no judgment, actionable. I can do something about that. I can take an immediate action based upon what you just gave me as feedback. And tentative, so that it makes it easy to receive from you. Tentative, that you'll own it and offer it to me as a gift that I can accept or not accept. So 7 facets of high quality feedback, and high quality feedback would be like a mirror, so that we look in the mirror, we get the feedback, and now it's actionable. I can do something about that information. And so the complete communication loop is open, so that I can sense not only what I'm saying and intending and trying to do, but I can see the response and what's working and what's not. And now I can keep making adjustments to moving toward my goal. So receiving feedback and converting whatever judgment come in those terms to get a person to give me the sensory base and behavior and and the actions that I can take with regard to that. So in terms of feedback, do you have a feedback process so that whatever your goal is, whatever you want to unleash, you identify some things you want to be unleashed to and unleashed from, do you have some evidence criteria by which you can tell that you're moving closer to what you want to be unleashed to? How will you know? How will you measure it? What will be the behavioral indicators? How will anybody else know? So these are the feedback questions, and if we actualize because we're moving, and the more the feedback fits this one, the faster you can move. And so who will you get feedback from? What will be the format and the process by which they'll give you that feedback? Will you ask for it? Or have you commissioned them to be giving it to you? Will you get it immediately? Or will it be in a delayed form? So what is the feedback structure by which you're going to get that? Because that'll keep you in the zone. Sometimes we compare this like shooting a missile to the moon, and it's said that they're off target 90% of the time, but the feedback just keeps adjusting it. And so with us going somewhere, if we know where we're going and we get the feedback, so we just keep adjusting it, that it's okay to be off course if we keep getting feedback. So setting up your feedback process, and the more you can enjoy it and thank people for it, the more they'll give it to you. They'll really give it to you.
Now, as you provide feedback earlier, as you do in number 3 in this pattern and all, people, a lot of the feedback that you get is judgment. A lot of judgment contained in there. So how do you carve that out and be thankful for them without being condescending? Because you're going to thank them for the judgment. You're going to are you just going to leave it blanket thank you, or thank you, this is what I got out of it? I mean,
Okay. So if we get judgment, how do we thank them for it, and how do we respond to mine from the judgment? Well, I don't want to thank them for the judgment. I want to thank them for their responsiveness. Thank you for noticing. Now, what you've said, I'm not really clear, and then we just explore if they're doing mind reading. How do you know that was my intention? I wasn't clear that was my intention, but something must have cued you, and you think that's my intention. So help me to understand that. How did you experience that and give this back? And we just really met a model, and the condescending, to not do it in condescending, is to really realize they're doing the best they can. And it might have pushed some of their buttons, and they're feeling insecure, and they're throwing a little bar back because somehow they took offense. And so especially if it's a relationship you want to protect, really saying, thank you for giving me that response. I don't quite understand it. Would you mind if I ask you some questions about it so that I can really get the most from what you're offering?
thank you for abusing me.
Thank you for abusing me.
Robert Dills has got a nice way to deal with that, because he would actually ask for the positive intent of that first. But the next thing he would do is to ask the person, so which how question do you have for me then? So, for example, if somebody would say something nasty to you, and you could ask, let's say you would say something nasty to me, and I would ask you, what's your positive intent? And then you would state that in some kind of way, and then I can ask you again, so what's the how question you have for me then? So then you reframe it totally into a question, and then you can have dialogue.
Okay. Did everybody hear that?
No, most of not.
So Robert Dilts has suggested, first ask, what's your positive intent in saying, responding, giving that to me, and then asking what's your how question for me?
So let's say if I would say, that was a lousy presentation, and then you could ask me, what's your positive intent? I'd say, well, to make it better. And then your question is, so what's your how question then? So then the feedback I'm actually having is, how can you make this presentation even better?
Okay.
That's how you close the loop.
Okay.
Can I take that one step further?
Sure.
So I do a lot of teleconferences that are set up through the internet with people from all over the place. And usually you have 100 people on a line. One of them is going to be somebody who's either got something psycho going on, or I'm convinced they've got something psycho. Can't tell which for reality. So and sometimes I'm thinking they got something psycho going on, but really it's just I misinterpreted. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, when somebody's giving you some kind of response like that, how do you get really clear on, are they who they are, what they are, and without, stepping in and offending or causing more problem or anything like that. Any thoughts?
Oh, I thought you were going to.
Yeah, we thought you were going to.
No, I
I was ready to write.
Wisdom.
Well, even say the NLP principle is I never know what I've communicated. So if I'm really okay with that, I know what I meant to, intended to, I'm trying to do, but I don't know what you've heard. It seems to me one question is, what did you hear? Because apparently my message sent and the message received, we're not on the same level yet, so what did you hear? And if I can just witness that, we do this in the diffusing hotheads process that we have in neurosemantics, so that even if someone is just upset and raging and irrational, and now saying not only nasty things but hurtful things, you asshole. Okay, sometimes I am. In what way now am I an asshole to you? Because that wasn't my intent. And talk about just taking the steam out of a person. Now, you can't do it sarcastically, condescendingly. Yeah, you have to.
What specifically are you trying to tell me?
What specifically are you trying to tell me?
From, just throwing this big global mess at you, and makes them come and check in with themselves and say, well, what am I really saying?
Yeah. Okay. So the challenge of feedback is when we're not getting feedback cleanly, but as judgment and as whatever's going on. And if, once again, their person behavior, so that I can really be compassionate because they're trying to respond in some way, and if I want to maintain that relationship and just witness it without personalizing it too quickly.
You're always assuming there's something going on over there. How can I either help or how can I see it in some kind of perspective that makes it a healthy interaction?
Yeah. So if it is a relationship with a colleague, with a family member, with someone you're working with someone who's you report to, with someone who reports to you, if it's a relationship and the relationship is important, because one thing we all forget from time to time, we get so caught up in the content, and if we get triggered so that we're personalizing, it's a fight. You're not going to talk to me that way. I'll show you how I'm not going to talk to you. And we forget relationship. And if we're trying to do two things at once, it doesn't have to be relationship or the content of whatever we're dealing with and that work, what we're trying to do, but maintaining both together, that as I maintain this relationship, now we can do good things and be efficient and effective and bring out the best in each other in a win-win way. So if we communicate to maintain both, then, and that's where you can see those pieces in this high-quality feedback. We're going to do it with rapport. And we're going to make it tentative so that I own it and don't impose. So with rapport means that I care about that person, even if they're in a grumpy state. Has anybody ever got in a grumpy state? And out of that grumpy state, you sounded grumpy, you looked grumpy. And so in terms of communication, sometimes it is not the time to talk. We need to take time out. And I can really save myself a lot of problems by calling time out on me. Just gauging my own state, knowing, because if I'm on the edge, right, at a threshold, just on the edge, just say one thing. Just last trigger. You don't know what's been happening all day. And then I can just, if I can be aware of, I'm in this state, it is not, I'm going to protect you by protecting me because I'm going to keep my mouth shut. So even protecting our own self. But I can do that with someone else. That if I'm pushing someone, and they're not in the place, and even asking, are you in the place to talk about this? Because when we get stressed out, stress does that fight, flight, and all the blood is withdrawn from brain and stomach, sent to the larger muscle groups. And it's 3 hours later we know what we should have said. Because we're not in our best state. And so even us protecting someone else by saying, do we need to call a timeout? We'll do this later.
I want to say it now.
I want to settle it now.
When anger goes up, IQ goes to hell.
When anger goes up, IQ goes down. So we have been into the construct. I have invited you to go into the construct of your mind, body, emotion system so that you, as a meaning maker, hopefully can step back and realize the power, the awesome power of your brain and emotions to construct meaning and to layer layers and layers of meaning. So in the days and the weeks to come, my wish and desire for you is that you'll really own your creator powers. Because as you say things, so they are. And you call into existence all kinds of meanings, and then you embody them. And you're in state with those meanings. And as a meaning maker, if you now can create with your meanings a crucible, a space for yourself, a space of just accepting and witnessing and acknowledging, a space of appreciating, looking for the best meanings, a space where you can speak whatever is that honest reality of the moment for yourself and for someone else, because that's where the problem solving is going to be occurring as you get really clear about what is important, where you're going to go, and what great ideas you'd like to embody. Then it's just a matter of synthesizing those meanings and performances so that you can perform the highest meanings that thrill you, that excite you, that make you more fully who you are. As you do that, you'll find some performances that you've been doing all your life, and now you can really enrich them with meaning. What rich, robust, exciting, inspiring meanings can you bring to the performances so that everything becomes meaningful? And as you do that, as you synthesize that, old meanings that have been embodied can just be released and eliminated. And so that your neural semantic reality, how you embody meaning, can really put you in that zone and bring out that uniqueness for you. So in the days and the weeks to come, throughout this year and the years to come, whatever you do in life, whatever is your occupation, as you live your life, my hope is that you'll be actualizing more and more potential, because what a contribution that'll make to the people you touch. It's been a real pleasure for me to be here this 3 days and to facilitate this, to do this for the very first time, and I'm looking forward to meeting and seeing many of you in other places and times, and we'll just continue this process of actualizing our best. So thank you.